Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. Now that you've found us, make sure that you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider, whether it's Podbean or iTunes or Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, any of them. That way you'll get all of our old episodes as well as all of our new episodes as soon as they post. This is actually our 4th episode of the week, so make sure that you check our other 3. We did a Dolphins autopsy, and yes, it was an autopsy even though they won because it was a pathetic game. We did a Dolphins autopsy on Sunday night, so make sure you catch that because we got into a lot of the Rashad Jones situation. Talked to Sage Rosenfels about the intersection between football and politics. That just went up today, so be sure to follow us or follow that one. Check that one out. And also, we did an episode with John Krasinski. I did that really well again. John Krasinski of The Athletic about the Jimmy Butler situation, and all of that still applies from when we talked to him yesterday. So be sure to check that out. Also, check out the other 13 podcasts in our network. That includes, of course, Miami Heat Beat, also 3 yards per carry on the Dolphins. Just posted an episode today, Light Skinned Opinions, Cinco Razones, and all of the other podcasts in our network, including our newest one, the Chamber Pod, and that's with former Dolphin Chris Chambers as well as Zach Duarte and Shay Tab, and that is on fitness and performance. All right, we're going to stick today to the NBA. We're going to go more around the league than we did with John yesterday. We're going to talk to our old friend, former South Florida resident Tom Haberstroh. He now lives in the Charlotte area. Also, he's former of about 32 other jobs. So we're just going to focus on the current one that he has, in addition to being Ira's nemesis. He is also the new national NBA insider for NBC Sports. So you can catch him at Tom Haberstroh and obviously follow all of his work there, which is going to be a combination of written work, video, and podcasting. So, Tom, it is election day as we're taping this. I've been hustling to get little old ladies to the polls and having people scream at me to get off their lawns. And we want to talk to you about the NBA from an election standpoint here. So we're not going to do politics on this pod, but we're going to frame it in a political contest. And I've got 10 kind of amendments, I would call them, that we're going to vote on. And this is going to be really clunky and all over the place. But are you game for this, Mr. Haberstroh?
I am. You said Ira's nemesis. I did not. I never brought that up, Ethan. You did. I never mentioned that before the show went on. I just wanted to make that clear. But yes, I actually I started this new job like 2 weeks ago. I was at ESPN for 8 years. I was at Bleacher Report for 1 year, and I've also started a podcast company. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was down in DC, or sorry, I should say up in DC for Heat Wizards. And I was introducing Eric Spoelstra, the coach of the Miami Heat, which is a pretty big deal, to my boss, who was, showing me around with the NBC regionals. And I say, hey, Eric, this is my boss, John. John, this is Eric. And Ira walks by and goes, oh, congrats on your new job, Tom. Another one? What, next week? Next week you're going to have another one?
I like your Ira impersonation. Ethan, you do an Ira, right?
I do, but not that. That's really good. I will say, I mean, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring on everyone who's ever worked with or against Ira, and we're just going to bring on like 20 different writers and have them all do their Ira impersonations here on the show, and actually we'll vote on those. I think we're going to do Ira impersonations. We're going to do Barry impersonations. We could do impersonations of a lot of different people in the market. That's a very, very good one. And I'll say this. Look, I mock you, but I mean, I had about 55 jobs.
I was going to say, the lack of self-awareness and criticizing someone else for having a lot of different jobs is a little bit flabbergasting.
Yeah, I had 3 jobs in 10 years.
That's pretty good. I mean, I had considering I worked at 2 of the newspapers down here twice and one of them once, in addition to the radio stations and Bleacher Report. That's pretty damn good.
I've worked for 7 different places this year.
This week, but only one matters, Chris.
Of course,
the one that you're on right now. All right, so we're gonna get to 10 things. These are 10 amendments. We're gonna start with Amendment 1, and that is this: Jimmy Butler is a top 10 NBA player. Mr. Haberstroh, yes or no?
I'm going to say no. His health with Thibodeau Miles, and I'm a big DMP rest guy and health analytics and all this stuff. If I need a player to play for me tomorrow, yes, he is a top 10 player. But if I need someone who's going to be ready in May or June, no. Jimmy Butler, I worry about his health. And I worry about the miles that he has. I mean, yes, he's an amazing player on both ends of the floor, and one of those two-way guys that is very hard to find in the league. But I just think that from a durability standpoint, not just the knee issues. There's a lot of knee issues to be worried about. But I just feel like he's 30 going on 35. And from a projection standpoint, no, I don't think he's going to be a top 10 player for long. Maybe today, but I think there are 10 players who are going to be better in 5 months' time.
I'm going to say yes, and it's sort of right on the boundary. There are a few players you can make an argument for, but I do feel like the Tibbs miles they're like 2 to 3 years of his career where he's playing a pretty ludicrous amount of minutes. It's not quite for me at a Luol Deng, Joakim Noah stage where that is around the corner for him. I still feel like, even considering that he's played for Tom Thibodeau for a few years, that you can say that he's going to experience a drop-off or not. Now, he does have, sort of outstanding health issues, but I'm not at a place where I think that because Tom Thibodeau has coached him for 2 or 3 years, that his career is going to be shorter than your average NBA player that's now playing into his mid-30s at a high level because of those few years. Now, that sort of grows ever more dire because the longer he stays in Minnesota, the more that's the case. But I still think that Jimmy Butler will be good enough for long enough to, again, because we talk about this in the specter of a long-term contract, that if you give him a long-term contract, I don't think he's going to start to fade at the end because he's been playing for Tibbs.
All right, and the amendment fails here because I'm going to go with Tom on this one. I know our Nekias Duncan believes he's a top 10 player. I think he has him at number 9. I just don't see him at that level right now, and secondarily, I totally agree with Tom on this. I don't think he's at that level in a year or two. And you look at some of the players in the NBA who are ascendant. I mean, look, top of my head, okay, I can come up with 7 that are easily better, okay, easily. And then there's another group, I think, of about 8 to 10 guys, and I think he's in that mix. But I think he's trending towards the back end of that mix. I don't think he's trending towards the front end. And, I think there are some other guys you can look at, like, I mean, I would prefer to have a Klay Thompson than a Jimmy Butler, and I don't think most people would put Klay Thompson ahead of Jimmy Butler. I think, and again, you look at some of the guys that are automatics. I mean, Giannis is automatic. AD is automatic. LeBron is automatic. Curry is automatic. Durant's automatic. Kawhi is automatic. Okay. And what is that? 7 right there, just top of my head. Then I think you move Embiid in there.
I'm with you on Embiid. Yep.
Right. So I think you move Embiid in there. Okay. And then, I think there are some other names here that again, not off the top of my head. Is Paul George better than Jimmy Butler? Look, Paul George shrunk in the playoffs last year, no question about it, but he doesn't have quite the wear that Jimmy has. I might put him ahead of him. And I think you can easily get to 14, 15 guys, and I think you can make a legitimate case. And I know you've made this case when it comes to offense, that at least on the offensive end, that his teammate is better than him. Karl Anthony Towns is a transcendent offensive player. He's not there defensively, but also 7 years younger. So I'm looking at 6 to 12 months from now. I think Cat's ahead of Jimmy Butler too. So I don't have him as a top 10 guy.
He's never in the last 6 years, he hasn't played more than 76 games. He's played 67, 65, 67, 76, 59. And then obviously this year he's taken a couple games off to quote unquote rest, as I put it on Twitter, DNP unrest. Ding, ding, ding. So
count the ding, ding, dings. That's
yes.
There you go.
Yes, go listen to our podcast if you're feeling like you didn't get enough on the 18 different podcasts you have with you guys. How many do you have now? You said 13.
14, adding a 15th if the boxing guys get off their asses. But yeah, we're at 14 right now, and I don't. But we're not as prolific as you guys at certain things. But yeah, we'll get there eventually.
Well, Jimmy Butler. The thing about Jimmy Butler is when he's playing, he's really good. But I do think it's kind of worrisome that now he's taken games off, and at the All-Star break, he took the game off, and he's missed just about every year, at least 20 games. So I love him as a kind of in-your-face defender. I think he's a much better ball handler and finisher than people give him credit for. They kind of think of like the young Jimmy Butler days, but this he's a great scorer. He's a really good scorer. But how do we Are we okay with what he's done in Minnesota and in Chicago? Like in terms of just blowing up the locker room? Like I know it on the face of it, it's kind of cool because it's like, he's such an asshole. But very few of his teammates seem to like the stars seem to like playing with him. I know D Wade did, but that was like you and me against the world in this locker room. But that scares me. And you would think that going back to Tip, because I hear this argument a lot, is that like if he was under Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, it would all work out. Didn't we say the same thing about Tibbs?
Yeah.
Like I know Jimmy Butler just blew up Fred Hoiberg and the rest of that Chicago organization, but he's on Tibbs' team, so he's going to be good. And this is a great acquisition for them. And he blew that up too, one of his closest confidants in the league. So I worry about the mileage, and I worry about I don't know intimate details about the locker room with Jimmy Butler, but it scares me. The last 2 stops, it's come to like this very public blow up.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And like you said, he's had issues with every prominent teammate he's had except Dwayne. I mean, he had issues with Rose. I know it's like all smiley now, but if you remember that situation, it wasn't great. I had heard from people who know both of them really well that he and Noah didn't even speak the last year they were playing together. Now you have a situation where it's clear he and Wiggins don't connect. And obviously with Towns, there's even more behind the scenes that's gone on there. And so you're talking about 4 of his most prominent teammates he's had issues with. I think that factors in to whether he's a top 10 player or not, to me.
And without really the team success, I know he's arguing on behalf of yes, but it's not like there's a great deal of team success that's followed him in his career.
No, I know. And look, I mean, he ascended when the rest of that Chicago team was descending, and so there was a place for him to move up in it. But yeah, I don't see him as a top 10 guy.
Can I just very quickly make a point, though, which is that he and Kyrie Irving came into the league in the same year, Jimmy Butler 2012, Kyrie Irving 2012. And Kyrie Irving has played in the first 7 years of his career 14,955 regular season minutes. Jimmy Butler's played 15,044. That's a difference of 89. And I just don't hear the same thought of, well, Kyrie Irving at the end of his career, is he going to have the longevity and sort of in thinking about a long-term contract? So just in terms of raw minutes played, now obviously intensity is another thing, but in terms of raw minutes played, I just don't see it.
Well, I think
it's because he's been hurt a lot. He hasn't played a lot of minutes because he's been hurt. So there's that. And then the Jimmy Butler over the last 6 seasons leads all players in minutes per game. More than James Harden, more than LeBron James, more than Anthony Davis, more than Andrew Wiggins. So the reason why he doesn't rack up a lot of the counting stats is because he's been hurt.
We'll get back to our episode on the NBA here in a second, but first I want to tell you about a great new sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is Brunt Insurance, where you can get all of your protection under one roof. Brunt Insurance offers home, auto, commercial, and life insurance, and they're licensed to write insurance for the entire state of Florida. That's Pensacola, all the way down to the Keys. They've got multiple carriers for all the product lines, so they can ensure you're paying the lowest rate in your particular area. And this is important. They're a proud sponsor of the Homes for Heroes program, so they offer special discounts for first responders, teachers, military, and healthcare professionals. Make sure to tell them that 5 Reasons sent you. Here's where you can find them. Bruntinsurance.com. That's Brunt, BRUNT, insurance.com, or 954-589-2204. That's 954-589-2204. And now back to the episode. Let's get to number 2 here. And this is the one that Heat fans are most interested in. And I just posted some stats on this about Josh Richardson. That it's clear that the Heat are trying to make him a featured player. They've been trying to do that from the beginning of this season. And I'd made the case beforehand that Josh Richardson's 3rd season looked a lot like Jimmy Butler's 3rd season. In fact, it was better. And now I'm looking at Josh Richardson's 4th season, and it looks a lot like Jimmy Butler's 4th, where they were exactly the same age. Josh Richardson right now averaging 21.4 points a game on 44% shooting. Jimmy Butler averaged 20 points a game in Chicago in his 4th season on 46% shooting. A lot of the other numbers are similar. They're both plus defenders. They were both plus defenders from when they came in. So it appears that Josh Richardson has made the jump that I and some others were projecting for him in his 4th season, and that the Heat were kind of hoping for. And obviously this plays into a trade situation. So I will throw this one at you. Amendment 1, Jimmy Butler, not a top 10 player. Now, Amendment 2, can Josh Richardson be, I'm not saying he is right now, can he be a top 25 player, Tom?
I think he can. He has gotten better every single year. When he was drafted by the Heat in the 2nd round, I think there are a couple other players, and we do this where we're armchair GMs, and we're like, huh? Josh Richardson? Really? And then the Heat were like, oh, Cameron, but Chet was like all over this guy, and it was like, man, no one believes in him, but just the size and the intensity and the work ethic. And those are not showing up in the box score. So I'm like, all right, fine. I mean, if you believe in the intangibles on this guy, then so be it. they were right. They were so on the money about this dude. When I watched them play the other night, I was on the road in DC, and I was able to have behind the basket seats, like right at the court level. And it was obvious who was the most energetic, intense, all over the place player on the floor. And it wasn't John Wall. It was Josh Richardson. And he was just everywhere. And it was clear that this guy was just a guy that everyone wants to play with because he's so active, because he's so sneaky long. And he made a lot of really smart plays, high energy plays. And those are the type of guys that it's very hard to find in the NBA. I don't think he's going to be an MVP candidate. I think Jimmy Butler has been in the past where he's been in the conversation for MVP. I don't think he's going to get to that ceiling, but that's okay. That's okay. Considering where the Heat got him in the second round as a 40th pick and where the organization is right now looking for a superstar player, I don't think he's that, but I think he is a really, really good player. And I think, yes, the ceiling on him is a light Jimmy Butler. I don't think he's going to get there in terms of the full Jimmy Butler, but he is going to be a really good, a great shooter right now. And last night when he pulled up, from last night in the closing minute and just nailed the three, it was like this guy has all the confidence now. And that's what they were looking for. So I really like Josh Richardson.
Yeah, I think you've seen the last couple of games as well, doing it with efficiency, shooting more than 50% from the field when he had only done it once in his first 7 games. And the other thing, too, from him is just as a volume shooter, he's taken 10 threes in 4 of his 9 games and has taken at least 6 in 7 of the 9. So all the things you'd want to see out of a primary scorer, the last couple nights in particular, have been really solid. And when you asked the question, top 25, I just looked to the ESPN NBA rank to see where they have the current set of players, and 25th is Kevin Love and 26th is Drew Holiday. So sure, yeah, he can absolutely be in that range. I think Kevin Love ended up proving to be a player who can be the 3rd best player on a title team. I think that's about right, and I think that's probably about the ceiling for Josh Richardson as well, is 3rd best player on a title team that's a really solid shooting guard that can do a lot of different things, and as Tom says, plays with real and legitimate intensity and intangible, and I think he can absolutely get into that territory. But again, this is in the spectrum of the conversation of, do you trade him for someone who could potentially be the 2nd best or even the 1st best player on a championship team? And I think the answer for me is still yes, but he turns in more performances like he did against Detroit and even in a loss against Atlanta, and I'm having a different conversation.
Yeah, my answer on that is no, by the way. I've come around to no, and a lot of it has to do with some of the things Tom talked about with Butler as a teammate, which concern me, and some just the crap he's pulled recently. I mean, the not playing back-to-backs and all that stuff. You know what Josh Richardson is inside a locker room, and I don't think he's going to change. I will say Winningham is only going yes here because Richardson is a big soccer guy, and so that's played into it. And indulged him with 20 minutes of soccer talk.
The same as Kevin. Like could it be as good as Kevin Love? Sure.
Well, you know my feelings on Kevin Love. I mean, come on. So, there you go. But, yes, I'm going to go yes here, so we're going to be unanimous. I do think he can be a top 25 player, I think somewhere in that 20 to 25 range, which means that he would be a borderline all-star in the Eastern Conference, because we know that, you could pretty much put 3 teams together in the West that might be as good as the 2nd team that you're going to have in the East. So I think Josh has a real chance to be an all-star. All right, so number 3 here, LeBron James is still a top 3 player in the NBA, Tom. Yes or no?
Yes. I'll put Steph 1. He's my number 1. Giannis 2, and then LeBron 3 right now. If LeBron is going to do anything defensively, then okay, he can be the best player. But it's clear to me that in 2014, a little story. In 2014, before a DC trip to the White House, I was talking to Spo at practice, and I was like, "Hey, Spo, have you seen LeBron's defensive statistics this year?" He's like, "Go over, refresh my memory." And I was like, his block rate is lower than Kyle Korver. His steal rate is lower than Kyrie Irving, which is funny in retrospect after he played with them a year later. But I was like, yeah, he's just dogging it defensively. And he's like, why don't you do me this favor? Go over there and tell him that. And I was like, oh, you want me to tell him he's dogging it defensively? And I was having this very off the record conversation with the coach. And then he's like, yeah, go tell LeBron that. So I go over to LeBron, and we do this thing where everyone does the scrum, and then I caught him on his way out. Windhurst called it sidling. I don't know what you guys call it, but as LeBron is walking back into the locker room or back through the back door of the practice facility, I grab him. And I say, hey, man, I just want to ask you about your defense. I just looked at some numbers and some things jumped out at me. And, like, you have your block rate, your steal rate. And he goes, so you think I'm coasting? And I'm like, yes. I think this is probably smart. I just want to make sure that you, like, are aware of how the numbers, like your block rate and steal. He's like, yeah, we'll see about Wednesday night in DC if you think I'm going to be coasting. So I was like, okay. So I go to DC, and it's the Wizards. It's the Greg Oden game where I think Greg Oden played, and it was like an amazing news story. I forget, Ethan, do you remember what happened that night? Like, Greg Oden wasn't supposed to.
He wasn't supposed to play, but then he ended up playing. Yes, I believe. Yes, because that whole year was about Greg Oden. Like, that was the whole thing. It was like Windhorst. You talk about Windhorst. He was obsessed with Greg Oden, just totally obsessed with Greg Oden, who made like the same contribution that Eddie Curry made to the Heat Big Three teams. But like every time Windhorst saw Oden take the court, oh my God, this is a huge story. Like,
and
I don't know that he can play.
No, and he was supposed to play that night, so kind of like it kind of submarined this story and swamped it. But LeBron, there was a ticker on ESPN that said, like, watch me on Wednesday and you'll see if I'm coasting. They got their asses handed to them. It was like they got blown up by like 25 points. And LeBron and I, we just made eye contact after the game, like, yep. So I didn't have my best game, but he was like, what he was trying to say was, Are you really think I'm half-assing it out there? And my point is, it's possible. Like, totally. Like, it's totally possible that you're preserving your energy on that end of the floor because you know that you can, if you need to, cover so much ground on the court and you can play safety and cover that ground. But a lot of times in today's NBA, in the regular season, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it to bust your ass, 20 feet down the court for a Tuesday Ish Smith layup. Like, sometimes it's just not worth it. And I think that's where he's at right now, is where he is trying to conserve his energy on that end of the floor. And he's got a bunch of young guys and he knows it's not a good defense. But if I'm going to compare his overall game versus what Steph is doing, what KD is doing, and what Giannis is doing, and Kawhi, he's not the best player in the league right now.
Well, I do understand that LeBron James sort of has to take this approach, particularly after the amount of minutes that he's played and everything that he's done in his career. I do also kind of don't understand it when the Cleveland Cavaliers are trying to build defensive habits, to play the Golden State Warriors in the finals and against Kevin Durant, and they get to the finals after not having played good defense all year and they expect to play good defense, or the Los Angeles Lakers are thinking about firing their coach or trading their team because they can't defend. Yeah, LeBron James got to take some of that. And on a night-to-night basis, okay, yeah, maybe a November game on a Tuesday against Detroit doesn't matter, but it matters to the sort of grander narrative about this team. And I feel like LeBron James night-to-night just doesn't bring it to the same degree that some other players in the league. So the question is he a top 3 player? Is he a top 3 player for playing Game 7 of the NBA Finals tomorrow? 100%. He's still at that level. But on a night-to-night guy you build around for your 82-game schedule, no, I think that, I'd rather have Anthony Davis. I'd rather have Giannis. I'd rather have, as you mentioned, Steph Curry. Like, there are other players you'd rather have on a night-to-night basis than LeBron James.
So, by the way, sidling is called burying, actually.
Dude. So, I waxed poetic about Barry's sidling to the reporter who called me, Brian Curtis, and it didn't make it into the story.
Oh, that's such a disappointment.
So Curtis wrote a huge feature about sidling and who the best are and who are like the legendary sidlers. I said, like, Barry Jackson is the LeBron of sidling.
Oh yeah,
but
never takes a play off though, Tom.
Never.
That's right.
Never takes a play
He's
off.
not coasting. He's never coasting, and he's always carrying like a big notepad with him, like a big in my head it's like a trapper keeper size binder. Maybe it's like a little tiny notepad, but just in my head, like a cartoonish outline of Barry Jackson, it's just this gigantic binder that he's carrying with him at all times.
I'm not super disappointed that Brian Curtis didn't write about Barry Jackson sidling. It's legendary.
To South Florida, he's an icon. Yes.
No, he is. There's no question. He said, all right, so I have to weigh in on this, and this is always challenging for me because of sort of personal feelings here. I would say this. I agree with Chris that during the regular season, he's not a top 3 player at this point. But assuming that team is making the playoffs, he will be one in the postseason. And so I'm still going to go yes. And again, I'm saying assuming that team is making the playoffs because I do not think that's a given. I understand that the Heat started 9-8 when he first got here. I understand because I was there that the Cavs started 19-20 his first year up there. But this feels even worse than that because, again, I don't know that LeBron is as motivated to change the narrative of early season struggles as he was in those two places. He was motivated in Miami because he had to prove he made the right decision. He was motivated in Cleveland because he was back home and he had won 2 championships. Now he's, motivated to executive produce movies. I'm not entirely sure, that his head is in the same place as it was before. And so I'm not entirely sure that if they fall behind in the Western Conference, that he's going to be, sort of willing to go 110, percent to get them back into it. So I'm going to say yes, assuming he makes the playoffs, but I could be convinced no. We'll get back to the episode here in a second, but first want to tell you about BetDSI.com. We talk a lot about football on there, Chris, because obviously a lot of people bet on football, college and pro, so definitely do that before the Thursday night game, before Saturday, before Sunday. But also you can bet NBA, and not just before the game, but also during the game.
Yeah, live betting is the way to go. I've certainly found it in my experience that you kind of need to get a sampling of how a game is going before you really can invest in it financially. Why guess how it's going to go ahead of a game when you can watch a little bit of it and then think, okay, I've got a feel for it. Here's how I'm going to bet. And you can do all this at BetDSI.com. They've added a new feature where they tell you sort of what's going on while you're betting it, and it's sort of a live play-by-play, a way to follow the game. Really cool stuff over at BetDSI, along with futures bets and sports of all kinds. You can bet it all over at BetDSI.com. Be sure to use the promo code REASON101 at checkout.
All right, let's go to number 4 here. And look, Tom, I think that the game has been not great this year. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I'm just going to pose this to you right now. Have the rule changes been good or bad for the game? In other words, would you keep them or would you repeal them?
I'd keep them because the space opens up the game so that you can see the players athletically at their best. Not just from I am going to blow by this guy and dunk on this guy, but also just skill-wise when you see, Steph and Trae Young and Kemba and Dame Lillard and all these guys pulling up from 30 and hitting them at a high rate. That's awesome to me. That's skill. That is skill. Putting the ball in the basket from 30 feet away, things that like Jordan and other amazing players down the line could not do. That's amazing to watch as a fan. Now, there is a limit in terms of like how good can defenses defend that. I think that's an open question, but the fact of the matter is that 3-point percentage isn't down dramatically this year. It's not. So it's not like the 3-pointers are killing the sport. I think in terms of the aesthetics of the game, I like it. I'm not a guy who wants pitchers duel in basketball because that means just a lot of like football rather than actual basketball. I don't like the whole Jordan rules of the bad boy Pistons because to me that was a different sport. And the fact that we glorify the 90s, it was not good. It was not great basketball. It wasn't. So I'm pro this era, and right now it's fast paced. So that's the big difference. When people are seeing the high point totals, most of that is just the fact that the possessions are just a whole lot quicker. This year, pace is up to 100 in terms of possessions per 48 minutes. It's over 100 possessions on average, and it's the largest jump in terms of speed since after the 99 lockout. So the 99 lockout was awful in terms of the quality of the game, and I think the year after that, speed jumped up by like 4 possessions. This is right there with it. So we're early, but right now it's just super fast, a lot of 3-pointers, a lot of foul calls off the ball, but I think that's going to go down. And generally speaking, I think this promotes all the athleticism of the game that it has to offer, and I'm a big fan.
I would say that as much as people are sort of thinking that maybe this era isn't good on defense or that these freedom of movement rules prevent you from playing defense, I don't think that what we're seeing is I saw you tweet about this, Ethan, that this is almost like the All-Star game where players aren't even trying on. I think teams are genuinely trying on defense, but they're struggling to keep up because offense is so good. I do think that this is about quality and skill and athleticism, which is what you're talking about, Tom, and not about teams struggling to defend or not trying to defend. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that the season starts earlier, so there are more teams that are pacing themselves, maybe not committing that full effort. But I do think that there is genuine effort to try and be good at defense. Like the Miami Heat are getting 120 dropped on them by the Hawks. You can't say that the Heat aren't trying to be good at defense or that they're taking it easy on that end of the floor. That's not that organization. They're trying. It's really good basketball right now. Like I don't think that this is about a lack of effort or it's scoring without impediment and it's basically who can make the most threes and that's it. No, like this is about genuine skill and scheme that have created the best version of offensive basketball.
Yeah, I'm gonna be outnumbered here. I'm not a huge fan of it so far, and I understand what you're saying. Players will adjust and officials will adjust and the numbers will start to come down. And as somebody who sat through, 23 games of 4 years of Heat Knicks in the late 90s, when basically you would score the same number of points in a game that we're seeing Golden State get to with 6 minutes left in the second quarter. I understand, okay, that overall the move towards more scoring and more freedom is a good thing. But I also look at the NFL and I, to me, what's happening in the NFL now where, quarterbacks have a 72%, completion percentage. Like it just doesn't feel hard enough. It just doesn't feel hard enough. And unless they're going to start these sports.
Why do we want to see complete passes?
I want to see it be difficult and then have the offensive players. I want to see what Michael Jordan had to go through, okay, where what happened to him against Detroit, where he was getting bodied by 4 different players and then dumped on his ass and had to figure out, okay, how am I going to combat that on the next possession?
Okay, then you have to be okay with the fact that he needs to retire twice to deal with it.
And he had to go gamble, and that's one of the reasons he retired. But that's a whole other story. So I don't know that it was just because of his body, but I want to see. Look, I just want to see the challenge of it because to me,
you want to see resistance.
I want to see resistance. What makes sports so compelling, okay, is an athlete who is up against it, okay? A Roger Federer who is going against Father Time and has to figure out how to adjust, okay? Or Nadal who's playing hurt, okay, with his knee and has to figure out in any sport, a Tiger Woods who's not what he used to be. I like to see that challenge, that resistance, and I just feel like right now, yes, Steph Curry is taking the shooting thing to a whole nother level, but man, you can't touch him, you can't do anything with him, and I mean, how do you even guard that? So it's like Steph is playing against himself, and I feel like that's what's going on in the whole league right now. Like, basically, the Warriors aren't even competing with the league anymore. They're competing with each other. Curry's competing with Durant, and then Clay decides to drop a 41-point quarter. Like, it's gotten obscene in that way to me, and I do think that although I do think younger fans like it because it's like a video game, I think a lot of other fans are kind of like, okay, is it enough at this stage? I mean, the Heat gave up, what was it, 123, 122, and 124 in 3 straight games? Like, I understand what you're saying. Like, they're trying, but if they're trying and that's what's happening, I think it's gone too far. But anyway, you guys have decided to keep the rule changes. You guys outnumbered me 2-1. All right, number 5 here. The Kings will finish within 10 games of the Rockets. Yes or no?
Whoa,
Tom?
This is like 2 amendments in one.
Yes. Well, that's what they do down here. They got an amendment down here in Florida, Haberstroh.
I didn't ludicrous thing in the way I voted for it today. I felt so mad about it.
Well, there were a few of them. There were like 3 of them that are these stacked amendments, but one of them, okay, one of our guys who likes to smoke a little bit had to make it, and he's also an environmentalist. He had to make a decision, okay, because one of the amendments was basically, do you want to clean up the Everglades? Okay.
No. Do you want to ban offshore drilling?
Ban offshore drilling. Even more important. Do you want to ban offshore drilling? So the answer to that would be yes. Okay, he's an environmentalist. Okay, he's liberal, whatever. But the other one was you also then had to ban vaping in public spaces, which I mean.
Man.
Okay,
those two things are linked. If you voted yes, you're saying yes to both of them. You cannot say, well, yes to that and no to that. Like, no, you have to say yes to both or no to both. It was ridiculous. Absolutely absurd.
Which made no sense also because the vaping is to replace the smoking, and so you would think that would be a better alternative. And so they basically just told environmentalists to fuck themselves essentially with this amendment because there really was no direction. It was worse than our Amendment 3 on gambling, which is basically yes means no and no means yes, which is also how the Heat have an arena right now, by the way. But anyway, all right, let's get back to this. I'm stacking this amendment. The Kings will finish within 10 games of the Rockets.
I think this is like Orlando last year where we got excited about Orlando and then they fell apart. So I'm going to say no. The Houston Rockets, I think, will come to Jesus about Carmelo and his defense and the fact that he's He's not an average player anymore. And I think that I think that's going to be tough. That you're going to have Chris Paul and James Harden having to have that difficult conversation along with Mike D'Antoni. But I do think that the Sacramento Kings were getting a little overly excited about their young guns. And I think this is going to be one of those cases of like Orlando last year. Houston, they got Jeff Bzdelik. I know Wake Forest fans like myself have a different opinion of Jeff Bzdelik at the college level, but he's actually a very, very good defensive coordinator for the Houston Rockets, and he's back with the team. Is that going to solve? Is he going to play defense like Luke Mamute and Trevor Ariza? No. But I still think that Daryl Morey will probably pull a rabbit out of a hat and get another defender out there, and they're going to be better from this juncture forward. So I think they're 4-5 now. I think they're going to be much better than that going forward. They're going to have a huge step back from last year, but I still think the Kings are going to probably be 15 to 20 games back.
I think the last two things that we've talked about are kind of intertwined. I think the Kings have been one of the teams that have benefited from the pace rule, or not the pace rules, but the pace change, it being faster and the rules. And I think once the league starts to catch up, I think Sacramento's going to fall off. And I'm just going to go ahead and say on Houston that this will not continue. They are 4-1 away from home and 0-4 at home. Going to go ahead and guess that Houston's not going to lose all their home games. I feel like they'll eventually get that turned around. They've won 3 straight. They're going to be fine, and I feel like they're going to probably get to somewhere between 50 and 55 wins, and so I don't think Sacramento's an above 500 team. I think Houston will be well clear of them come the end of the season.
Yeah, I think the Rockets are going to be a high 40s team, actually. By the way, preaching to the choir here on Carmelo. Whittingham knows my feelings on that. He's not even close to an average player at this point. He's a well below average player. The numbers have shown that for the last 3 or 4 years. And as I've said, he's basically Alex English who played in the big market. I mean, that's, in addition to Denver. To me, if you look at their numbers, Tom, look it up someday. And it's worse now. Go to basketballreference.com and put in their numbers together, and they're identical. Alex English and Carmelo Anthony. And nobody talks about Alex English. I mean, he was an underrated player, but nobody talks about him in the same breath they talk about Carmelo. So I'm with you completely on Carmelo. I do think the Kings will drop off, probably finish in the low 30s, which is about where they usually end up, which is about a 15-game cushion for the Rockets. So I think we all are saying the Rockets will finish more than 10 games ahead. All right, number 6, Brad Stevens is a good offensive coach. Yes or no, Tom?
Man, on our pod that we call him Basic Brad, because he draws up a lot of basic sets, and then we just worship him. He has this aura around Brad Stevens primarily because of the defense. And I don't call him Basic Brad, but Dave Dufour over there at Count the Dinks, who does a great job on the Thursday pod, he is just not a believer on the sets, the plays that Brad Stevens draws up, and it's not an inventive offense. It is not a good offense right now, and it should be a lot better. So right now, I would say not doing a great job. I say he is a good offensive coach, but at this moment in time, he needs to do a lot better. They're 27th in offensive rating. The teams behind him, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Orlando, those teams do not have half as much offensive talent as Brad Stevens does. They have to be better.
And the teams that are ahead of them are Washington, Detroit, like Philly's down there. Wow. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, which is that they should be much better. They have a lot more talent, and this was always going to be a difficult job for the coach. But for as much praise as Brad Stevens gets, this should be a job that he's up for. Now, they're second in the league in defense. They're one of the few teams in the league that can actually defend, like in a sort of a pre-pace change way. When you look at defensive rating, good is kind of, for me, below 102. And there are only 3 teams in the league that are below 102. Portland is 4th in the league of defense at 104.6. Boston is a legitimately good defensive team, but I feel like Brad Stevens has always gotten credit from an offensive point of view for drawing plays up out of timeouts. There are very kind of basic ways in which fans judge coaches that, like, where you can pretty clearly isolate the performance of the coach. And out of a timeout, if you're constantly getting scores, like Spoelstra's really good at this, but Stevens has always been credited for having amazing plays that's one of the reasons why he's a good offensive coach. But you look at some of the underlying numbers, they have not always been impressive, even with some pretty quality offensive talent as the Celtics do now. He has to do a lot better with this team. So I agree with Tom at the moment. You have to say no.
Yeah, I would say no also. And the ATO thing has been overrated, by the way. If you actually look at the numbers, it's not great. Spoelstra's is not overrated, but Stevens is overrated in that area. And I think what Stevens has gotten credit for is how his players have fallen off when they've left Boston, because other than Kelly Olynyk, everybody got much worse. And maybe a lot of
overperforming expectations. That's really what he's done his whole career, which he's not doing now.
But overperforming expectations is the same thing as players leave Boston and don't play as well, because basically the players play outside of Boston like you would expect them to play. They play better in Boston, but now that he has a lot of offensive talent, it's not working out so well. I'm going to say no on this one. Get back to the episode here in a second. Do you know what you're doing on Sunday? Well, now you do. You're going to be hanging out with us at Uncle Al's in Sunrise. That's Uncle Al's in Sunrise. This is the one near Nob Hill in Sunrise. This is the new location, 10033 Sunset Strip. That's 10033 Sunset Strip. Come hang out with us. We're going to have food specials. We're going to have drink specials. We're going to have giveaways. I got some more hats to give away, some 5 Reasons hats. We get some Miami Heat Beat shirts also. And here's the thing. You can be part of history. Yes, that's right. We are 0-5 this year in watch parties. That's 0-5, 3 different teams, 5 straight losses. And now we've decided this is a good time to have another watch party. The Dolphins are going up to Lambeau Field in November against an angry Packers team and Aaron Rodgers. What could possibly go wrong? So come drink with us. Come eat with us. Have a great time. Again, Uncle Al's Sunrise. Game starts after 4 o'clock. We'll be out there starting at around 3.
We're going to be 1-5 Reasons. Come on, Dolphins.
All right, go to number 7 here. I'm going to frame this a little differently than I initially planned on, but let's talk about the Sixers. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons will win a championship together. Not separately, not if they end up parting, but together. Tom, yes or
I'm
no?
going to say no only because it's so hard to win a championship, but that doesn't mean that I don't think they're awesome together. Last year, when they played together, they were the best duo on court. Their on-court plus-minus was something like 16 per 100 possessions, plus 16, which for on-court duos, they were the best tandem in the NBA together. This year, what has changed?
Markelle Fultz.
They are trying so hard to shoehorn Markelle Fultz into that starting lineup, but you cannot in today's day and age with all the scouting and all the analytics and all the tendency reports that these teams get and expect those two guys to be going against the top shelf defenders and the best players on the floor and having a good offense. Now, I recognize the fact that Ben Simmons needs to get a jump shot. I see that. But I also see a guy who is so compromised offensively, Markelle Fultz, where I was watching them against Atlanta. Atlanta didn't guard him. It was 5-on-4. They did not guard Markelle Fultz. They triple-teamed Joel Embiid every time he got the ball. Because of Markelle Fultz, they were ignoring him. It was disrespectful. Honestly, watching it, I felt bad. I felt dirty watching this happen because it was so mean. It was so mean what they were doing to Markelle Fultz, just letting him go. And he just stood there by himself in the corner. And what are you supposed to do? Like in today's NBA, you can't have 2 ball dominant guys who cannot shoot. You have to have shooters around them. You have to. With Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz, you need to surround them with shooters. And when those 2 guys are on the floor, it's not just that they can't shoot, it's they won't shoot.
And the thing for Philly is that you look at Embiid being the best shooter of that group of 3 guys. That's meant to be their core. Joel Embiid, as the 7'2" guy, can't be the best shooter out of the lot. And I agree. I think it's so hard to get away with one player who can't shoot, and that would be Ben Simmons leading the way. A second is just devastating. And I didn't know that he was getting the Tony Allen treatment, Markelle Fultz, but
not even. It was like the Tony Allen squared. It really was.
Wow, that's like incredibly harsh.
There was no one within 20 feet of him.
There was negative defenders around Markelle Fultz. Yes. But yeah, I think that there are extenuating circumstances there. As a 2, I absolutely think that can be the core of a championship team, but they need a 3rd. And Markelle Fultz was supposed to be the 3rd, and early returns are that he won't be. And that would be my concern, is that Philly had some of their process assets compromised by Brian Colangelo to go and get Markelle Fultz, and now they don't appear to have another go at this unless they do it in free agency, and that gets harder and harder as particularly these players come up for extensions as well.
All right, so you're saying yes or no?
I'm saying yes.
All right, I'm saying no. I don't think they win a championship together, and I think it's going to be more of a personality thing than even a playing style thing. I just think – I know what you're saying, Tom, how good they were together on the court. but they don't seem like a personality fit to me. And when you look at superstars that to stay together for a long time, you kind of have to be to a certain degree. I do think that's why it worked with LeBron and Wade down here, and it didn't work long-term with LeBron and Kyrie. I know that they did win a championship, but I think the odds would be against it. But we're going yes overall. All right, we're going to do these rapid fire here because I know you got to run, and we want to get to some of these here quickly.
Here's a stat, real quick. Here's a stat.
Okay.
Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz on the floor together without Joel Embiid. Their offensive rating is 67.
Oh my God!
Good Lord, man!
All right, next.
This NBA.
Next.
This NBA. Holy shit! All right,
Next.
All right, number 8. Quick. All right, which of these two backcourts needs to be broken up first? And I guess this might be sort of obvious because one team's playing better, but Portland or Washington?
I'm gonna go with Washington. I think they need a shakeup. I all the pieces there, but they need a shakeup. I like Scotty Brooks, but there's something stinks in DC, and they need to figure it out. And I would shake things up. Yeah.
Well, that's not the only thing that stinks in DC, Tom. But all right, we'll go with that. We'll see how things play out.
Had to get your election day dig in there.
Well, I mean, it is election day. It's a voting episode. All right, go ahead. What you got?
I'm gonna say Washington as well, but for the reasons that you just mentioned, we said sometimes superstars' personality fits just don't work, and that is definitely one of them.
Yeah, definitely one of them. And look, if I were the Heat, I would take a long look at Bradley Beal. If you could try to steal him away, we'll see. But yes, I agree with you. It's Washington. I think Portland can live with this a little longer. All right, number 9 here: Spurs Raptors trade. If Kawhi takes Toronto to the finals and leaves, who won the trade?
I still say Toronto.
I agree.
I'm a big fan of DeMar DeRozan. Not a big fan. I'm probably fading DeMar DeRozan in terms of his player value. I don't think he brings anything defensively. I like what Pop has done with him so far this season, but I always grade trades not on the result, but what the value was at the time of the trade. And so many things can go sideways, but if you're Toronto, you have to make that deal. The upside is so much worth the downside. If you're Toronto, you know what you had in DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. You had to make that deal.
I'm gonna say Toronto if they make the finals. I mean, considering what they've gone through in the Lowry DeRozan era, all the different ways that they've been associated with failure, to get out of the Eastern Conference would even be in and of itself an amazing achievement. That I think that Toronto getting there and finally kind of lifting themselves from what's basically been a moribund franchise for as long as they've been in the league. I'm going to go ahead and say that is a massive achievement. You do anything you can to put yourself in a position to win the championship, even if they get hammered in the finals. I'd say that was well worth it.
All right, I'm going to say it's worth it also. And the other thing is, too, if Kawhi leaves, you just reset. And like you said, you're getting off of DeRozan's contract, so you basically can figure out what else you can get to Toronto. And I think they've proven that you can win if you go there. All right, last one for you here, Haberstroh. I'm going to give you 4 names, 4 relatively young names in the NBA. You tell me, you give me an order here of how you like them. Jamal Murray, Buddy Hield, Zach LaVine, and Karis LeVert.
Okay. This is tough. Okay.
Well, these are all guys I wanted to draft in the fantasy league. And
right.
Chris,
Jamal Murray, number 1, and not just because you mentioned him first. Jamal Murray, number 1. LaVine, 2. LeVert, 3. And Buddy Hield, 4.
I think it's a bit unfair that we're asking this question the night after Jamal Murray dropped 48 points in a win for the Denver Nuggets to take them to a 9-1 record at the top of the Western Conference. But it's got to be him, and I feel like Denver has kind of done a sneaky good job of building through the middle. Like this is not a team that's bottomed out and had a dreadful season, and they've kind of been in the 30-win range and have kind of been knocking on the door. And yet here they're sitting with Murray and with Jokic after signing Millsap. They've got some other young players coming through the pipeline as well. Gary Harris is a solid player. Like they've got a good team, and they built it through the middle. And I think Jamal Murray's a player that leads the way. I'm
going to go with Murray first. I'm going to go with LaVine second. I'm stunned, actually, at the way he's playing, as efficiently as he's playing.
28 points per game, yeah.
Yeah, I was not expecting the efficiency. That was the part that surprised. I've always liked parts of his game. He had that really good second half of the season where he shot the ball really well from 3 a couple years ago. I think he shot like 43% in the second half. I was like, whoa, there's more to his game. And I've always liked his temperament, but I didn't think that his efficiency would get here quite now. I'm going to go with Hield third, and I'm going to go with LeVert fourth. I just think the upside with Buddy is bigger, and I think you're seeing now kind of because Sacramento got mocked for that trade, and I think you're seeing now that there was legitimate upside, and maybe he can play on the ball a little bit as well as off the ball, and that there is a real future there. So I'm going to go in that order. All right, you can follow him at Tom Haberstroh. One of his 35 jobs. I'm just kidding. I'm not Ira. And hopefully he'll check in with us again for more Barry Seidling stories. Obviously, you should check out Count the Dings when you're not listening to us. Great podcast network. We're going to start stealing some ideas from you guys if that's okay with you at some point here.
Are you going to do a recount the dings so that
that's our election
podcast.
Day.
Yes.
Our election
that's
podcast.
Right. Well, and we're in Florida, so the odds of a recount tonight are pretty damn good. The hanging we don't do hanging chads anymore though. That's the only thing. We've gotten away from that since 2000. We just disenfranchise voters. So that's our thing down here. But Tom, you're voting in North Carolina these days, aren't you?
I did. And I did vote this morning and happy to do it. But I do have to take this call now at 4:15. I love you guys. Thank you for having me on, and can't wait to see you guys in Miami again.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Ringer podcast. Thank you so much.